Hi, welcome to this office hours video number 4. In this video I'm talking about why it's so hard to change your mind, and I'm actually going to call it 5 reasons it's hard to change your mind. Now, we might think in an ideal world that we want to be flexible, cooperative, good at listening, able to take both sides of an argument, rational, and sort of what we might think of as an ideal, sensible person. But the truth of it is, in this day and age, we have basically all of the information of the world always available to us. I mean, I have an Alexa, and I say, Alexa, when was the Spanish Inquisition? And it tells me. But yet we're not much smarter, I don't think. And if anything, we're almost relying on more biases and more polarized views than we were before. So let's have a look at 5 reasons it's very hard for us to change our mind. The first reason it's hard for us to change our mind is that we over-rely on instinct and emotional bias. And we can think of something that previously we've called faulty thinking. We jump to conclusions, we're very negative perhaps about ourselves, the world, and the future, and also we imagine that we know things that we couldn't possibly know. Mind reading, crystal gazing. So I call them conclusion jumping, talking down, and crystal gazing. We use these strategies a lot, and these are process strategies, and they tend to take us to an overly biased or a not accurate enough outcome. But because the problem that humans have is that we always believe ourselves to be correct, it's very hard sometimes to see these processes in action and therefore to challenge them. The second reason it's hard for us to change our mind is that we are suckers for a good story. Years ago, a mentor of mine once said, the only thing people will die for is a story. And it seems like a strange thing to say, but if you think about it, people die for their regiment, people die for their country, people die for a political cause, people certainly die for a religious cause. And these are in effect stories. They help us to make sense of the world. We are narrating people. We create stories about everything that we do, and we create stories about ourselves. We have internal stories about who we are. And because we're always creating stories, it's very easy for that story to become excessively negative or excessively biased. And in depression, that is true. You have an excessively negative story about yourself. Your problem, of course, is that you believe it to be true. The third reason it's hard to change your mind is that our reasoning is both biased and lazy. We tend to seek out information which confirms our biases, and we're lazy at challenging it. But this doesn't mean that we're just terribly gullible, because if someone else has an opinion, we're very, very quick and very efficient at picking the holes in their logic. We're just very lazy at picking the holes in our logic. But if you think about it, human reason evolved in a social setting, and we're social animals. And it's probably the case that if we defend our own position, but we can pick the holes in somebody else's, in a social setting, if we listen, and if there's a to and fro, we probably end up with some kind of consensus that sort of makes sense for everybody. But when our problem is internal, like depression, and our biases are towards ourselves, we're always seeking out information, or, to be more accurate, information gets into our system below the level of consciousness that confirms our bias. And we're lazy at challenging it. The fourth one is a bit like number 3, but it's called confirmation bias. We are very, very loath to challenge something that we already believe. And it might be that we get a dopamine rush when we find information that supports our particular belief or bias. And we might be unwilling to give up that dopamine rush. Now, just because it's a dopamine rush and therefore it is rewarding doesn't mean to say that what we get is actually a reward. If you believed, for instance, that you were a useless person and you did something and it didn't turn out very well, and you said, oh God, I knew I was useless, that would potentially give you a dopamine rush by this reasoning. But the ultimate outcome is that you're more confirming that you are useless as opposed to challenging that viewpoint. So confirmation bias is a real problem because it filters out information which disconfirms things that we hold about ourselves to be true. And the fifth reason it's hard to change your mind is something called cognitive dissonance. Whenever you express an opinion, the act of expressing it makes it feel more true. If you find something on Facebook, for instance, a political, a religious, a cultural, some kind of an opinion, and you agree with it and you press like, you have ever so slightly strengthened your belief in that position. And so we're always trying to confirm the biases that we have by buying into them. It's a bit of a joke, but I always say that God shares the same prejudices as you have, because we cherry pick those parts of whatever texts we're looking at that support our own prejudices. So there's 5 reasons why it's hard to change your mind. The problem is, if we are struggling with depression, even anxiety, but any kind of psychological problem which has a strong belief system at its core, that belief system is not serving us well. We might believe it's true because we always believe that we're correct, but it's not serving our purposes, and it's potentially holding us in a depressed situation. So I'm going to put a worksheet alongside this video, and the worksheet is a classic CBT way of challenging a belief, a negative belief. So what you do is find a negative belief that you have about yourself. So it could be, I'm useless. So you write in, I'm useless, on the left-hand side. You rate how distressing it is or how much you believe it on in the next column. In the next column, you write evidence that supports that belief. And it's got to be logical evidence. It can't be, well, I feel like I'm useless. It can't be that sort of more subjective thing. And then in the next column, you write evidence that disconfirms that you're useless. Now, that's the hard part. And the reason it's hard is because of cognitive bias, right? It's hard to dredge up reasons that disconfirm your negative belief. It can be almost painful to do it because you believe that you're useless, but that's not helpful, right? It's not helpful to go through life thinking that you're useless. And so you've got to put in, I would say, at least 5 reasons why you're not useless. And think about the reasons as you do them. And if you get into it, you can do lots. When I do this with people, we can do 10, 12, let's say. And then at the end, you rate how much you believe the original belief. And you see if it's changed. And a thought record is a good way of challenging kind of really straightforward, obviously useless negative beliefs. And I say obviously useless. If you said that to someone, if you said, do you think I'm useless? They go, no, of course not. Why would you say that? Oh, okay. So that's a sort of an obviously negative belief that we might hold to be true. But of course, these negative beliefs, we keep them secretive. We keep them inside ourselves. We don't necessarily share them. And therefore, it's very hard for them to get changed and modified. So try the thought record exercise and let me know how you get on with it. And you can obviously do it repetitively with different beliefs. And it's just doing this exercise per se will not eradicate a belief because, you've been holding on to the belief for some period of time. But what I'd like it to do is to demonstrate to you that not everything you believe about yourself is accurate. Not everything you believe about yourself is true. And by that I mean it's likely to be biased. It's likely to be distorted. You're likely to be seeking out information which confirms it. You're likely to be rejecting information which disconfirms it. And you're likely to be getting a dopamine rush by imagining that it's true or finding reasons for it to feel true. And that's not going to help you in the long run. So do the thought record. Let me know how you get on. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen.